The death of the Soul King at the hands of Yhwach, the Quincy Emperor, marks a pivotal moment in the battle between the Shinigami and the Quincy. The Soul King serves as the linchpin holding the three worlds of Hueco Mundo, the Soul Society, and the world of the living together. His power, known as the Almighty, ensures the balance of the reincarnation cycle. With his death, the collapse of all three realms becomes inevitable. By absorbing the Soul King's power, Yhwach elevates himself to the most powerful being in existence. In this desperate situation, an unexpected ally is enlisted in order to help the Shinigami, and it's the main antagonist of the Arrancar arc, Restraining Aizen. In this video, I'll be aiming to break down the Shinigami's efforts to prevent the royal palace from falling out of the sky, and I'll be examining the reasoning behind Shunsui's decision to release Aizen from prison. Additionally, we'll be exploring why the right arm of the Soul King, Mimihagi, despite being connected to Yhwach, had refused to assist Yhwach in his quest. A lot of events unfold surrounding the fall of the Soul King, so be sure to stick around until the very end of the video where I'll be explaining the consequences of Yhwach absorbing the Soul King and what it means for the ongoing war between the Shinigami and the Quincy. So without further delay, let's begin my analysis of one of the most catastrophic moments in the 1000-Year Blood War arc. We got really tired of the same old boring anime shirts, so we decided to launch Getsuga.com with the aim of creating designs inspired by our favorite anime and manga. We came up with designs that look cool and represent all of our favorite stories. Check out the latest Instinct collection, which features some amazing designs like this Frosted Heavens design inspired by Toshiro Hitsugaya, or this Instinct design inspired by Hollow Ichigo, and my personal favorite, which is the Heart design, which was inspired by Ukiura Shifa. Do not miss out, go to Getsuga.com and wear your favorite stories. Chapter 611 of Bleach is titled The Soul King Dies, and this is where we witness Yhwach's overwhelming victory over Ichibe and the Zero Division as he acquires the power of the Almighty, an ability which is also wielded by the Soul King, and it grants Yhwach the ability to see and alter the future. After defeating Ichibe, Yhwach ominously declares to the Soul King that he will be the next to die. As Ichigo and his team arrive at the royal palace, they find Ichibe's body lying on the ground. Despite his grave injuries, Ichibe speaks to Ichigo, instructing him to call out his name. Upon being revived, Ichibe urgently informs Ichigo that he is the only one who can stop Yhwach. He explains that the Soul King is the key to maintaining the balance of the worlds, and with his death, the Serete, Hueco Mundo, and the world of the living will all collapse into oblivion. At this point, Yhwach makes his way into the Greater Soul King Palace, where he slaughters the Soul King's guards and confronts the king himself. He goes on to denounce the Soul King as an incompetent god who does not even possess the power to flee at such a dire moment. Yhwach then delivers a fatal blow, stabbing the Soul King, as he notes that it is very likely that the Soul King had foresaw these events. In chapter 612, we shift back to the Soul Society, where Renji and Rukia encounter Shinji, Omaida, Soifon, and Momo. When Renji questions why Omaida brought his sister with him, Soifon explains that both she and Omaida were recently healed by Momo from their injuries. Shinji remarks on the unusual nature of the message that they received, summoning all captains and vice captains, even at the risk of abandoning their ongoing battles. Soifon opens the door to a nearby building, revealing a laboratory with Urahara, Byakuya, Nanao, and Yushiro inside. Shinji asks Urahara to explain the situation, and Urahara updates them on the current state of the war. He explains that Squad 7 is unable to participate due to the injury sustained by Captain Komamura. However, captains of Squads 3 and 9 are coordinating their efforts with Squad 12, which more than likely means that Mayuri will be joining them later. He also reveals that the captain of Squad 11 and the lieutenant of Squad 9, including Ikkaku and Yumichika, are receiving emergency treatment in the adjacent room, as we learn about the severe injuries that Kinpachi had sustained. Now, as for head captain Shunsui, he has been urgently summoned to the central 46 chambers. The only individuals who remain unaccounted for are Rangiku and Hitsugaya. Despite their exhaustion, Shinji questions why they were gathered, to which Urahara reveals their next move. The plan is to now force their way into the royal palace. As Shinji expresses doubt about the possibility of entering the royal palace, Urahara reassures him that that it is achievable. He explains that it's thanks to the Tenchi Heso which was brought by Yushido, along with a pedestal constructed by Mayuri and the massive amounts of spiritual power generated by having all of the captains and lieutenants gathered in one place will hopefully be the perfect recipe for them to force their way into the royal palace. The Tenchi Heso, or the heavenly bestowed armaments, refers to the various sacred tools and weapons held by the noble Shihoin family. We had seen some of these royal armaments during the Soul Society arc. After Urahara's explanation, Ukitake emerges from the treatment room, having completed the healing process for the injured Shinigami. In a parallel scene, we see Ichibei lamenting the fact that Ichigo may not be able to defeat Yhwach. Ichibei's cryptic remark, "Peace is always that way," remains open to interpretation. However, the Can't Be Unworld light novels reveal later that Ichibei had intended for Ichigo to become the new Soul King if he had failed to defeat Yhwach here. Back in Urahara's lab, Ukitake announces that these secondary medical procedures have been completed. When Shinji expresses his concern for Ukitake's health and well-being, Ukitake reassures him, as he jokes that his long experience with illness has made him quite adept at handling medical matters. His lieutenants praise him for his resilience, though it is in a light-hearted way, as it's not something one would typically be proud of. Ukitake explains that thanks to Kotetsu and Hanataro, all of the injured captains, except for Kinpachi, are now able to move around. Kinpachi is still recovering, and he attempts to leave the treatment room to search for Yachiru, but Urahara blocks his path with a Kido barrier. Furious, Kinpachi is calmed by Nanao, who explains that it would be more efficient for the rest of the 11th Division to search for Yachiru, rather than Kinpachi going alone. Once convinced, Kinpachi agrees to stay, as Urahara then distributes special orbs designed to absorb the Reiatsu of the captains and lieutenants. At this point, the Vizards Hiyori, Love, Lisa, and Hachi arrive, with Hiyori carrying a large container with a clear substance. When Rukia notes that the liquid doesn't feel wet, Urahara explains that it is a unique material that is found in the rifts between the Soul Society, the Dangai, and the world of the living. This liquid will serve as the energy source for their transport to the royal palace. Once the captains and lieutenants pour their Reiatsu into the liquid, Urahara will use it to create a gate that directly connects their location to the royal palace. Urahara further clarifies that this plan is only possible because Ichigo had previously pierced the defensive barriers between the Soul Society and the royal palace. However, there is a catch. They won't be able to return to the Serete once they cross over. Soifon, visibly angered, accuses Urahara of underestimating them, assuming that they would back out after hearing this. She declares that if Urahara considers himself a member of the Gote 13, he should never doubt their resolve. Ukitake supports this statement, affirming that everyone present shares the same determination to protect the Soul Society. Meanwhile, Kinpachi, unfazed, expresses that all he wants is another chance to fight Quincy. As Ichigo and his team reach the royal palace, Yhwach greets them with disdain, comparing Ichigo to a pathetic insect about to be crushed by the gears of fate. In a seemingly benevolent tone, Yhwach states that personally burying Ichigo is the least that he can do, a remark loaded with meaning as it hints at his awareness of Ichibei's plan to turn Ichigo into the new Soul King. When Ichigo declares his intent to kill Yhwach, the latter remains unfazed, revealing that he has already foreseen all of this thanks to the power of the Almighty. When Ichigo questions Yhwach's changed eyes, Yuha explains that they are the eyes of a true Quincy. He calmly tells Ichigo and his friends that they have arrived too late, for the Soul King has already been impaled by his sword. As Ichigo rushes forward to remove the blade, his friends call out to him, but Yuha taunts him, saying Ichigo is about to save the Soul King, only to destroy the Soul Society with his own hands. Ignoring the warning, Ichigo pulls the blade from the Soul King, and to everyone's horror, blue veins appear across his upper body as Ichigo, seemingly against his will, suddenly cuts the Soul King in half. Yuha explains that the Quincy blood within Ichigo's body could never tolerate the Soul King's existence, and together they will witness the collapse of the Soul Society. The walls around the Serete begin to crack, signaling the start of this destruction. in chapter 615, the consequences of Ichigo's actions rippled throughout all of reality, as it's felt within the world of the living where earthquakes are happening. Confused and tormented, Ichigo struggles to understand why he wasn't able to remove the sword and why he wasn't in control of his body when he cut the Soul King. Yhwach explains that his Shrift A is for the Almighty, which grants him the ability to see and alter the future. He further reveals that his power flowed into Ichigo, awakening the Quincy blood within him and forcing Ichigo to cut down the Soul King. Determined, Ichigo grips his Zanpakuto and attacks Yhwach once more, surprising the Quincy Emperor with his resolve. Meanwhile, back in the Serete, the roof of Urahara's lab begins to dismantle, prompting concerns from the other Shinigami about a possible enemy attack. Urahara, realizing what's happened, admits that the Soul King's death is causing the instability of all of the realms, as this signals the end of the Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the world of the living, as all three realms are on the verge of collapse. In the royal palace, Yhwach informs Ichigo that one of the main responsibilities of the Soul King and why he was created was to stabilize the Soul Society by balancing the overwhelming influx of souls. With the Soul King now dead, the entire structure of reality is unraveling thanks to Ichigo's intervention. Suddenly, Yoruichi appears behind Yhwach, taking him by surprise. She calls upon Orihime to use her powers of reality rejection to restore the Soul King. However, despite her efforts, the attempt fails disastrously. Yhwach mocks Yoruichi, asking if she truly believed that a mere human's powers would be able to bring the Soul King back. He then declares with finality that the Soul King can never be revived, he is dead. As earthquakes begin to ravage the three realms, the Quincy's begin to question if Yhwach intends to destroy everything, including themselves. Meanwhile, the Shinigami start to panic, but Ukitake steps forward, revealing that he will take the place of the Soul King. He removes his cloak, exposing the Kamikake on his back, and he prays to Mimihagi, the entity stored within his organs. A large, shadowy figure then emerges from Ukitake's body, leaving the other Shinigami in shock. And this is where he was struck by a deadly lung disease which bleached his hair white. Although expected to die, Ukitake was saved when his grandmother, a superstitious woman, took him to the shrine of Mimihagi. This was a deity said to have descended from the heavens, and it is revealed to be the right arm of the Soul King. His grandmother performed a ritual offering Ukitake's lungs to Mimihagi, thus allowing him to survive. Since then, Mimihagi's power had consumed Ukitake's lungs, and through a ritual known as Kamikake, that power now extended to the rest of his organs, thus making him a vessel for the deity. Ukitake always believed that the day would come when he would have to repay his life in order to protect the world. As Mimihagi violently pours out of Ukitake's body, the earthquakes begin to cease. In the royal palace, everybody present is startled as Mimihagi appears and grabs the two halves of the Soul King. Yhwach, enraged, questions whether if Mimihagi developed an attachment to the Soul Society after protecting it for so long. Mimihagi's eyes close in response, and meanwhile, in Urahara's lab, Soifon asks how long Mimihagi can hold the Soul King together. Urahara admits that it will likely last only as long as Ukitake lives. He stresses that the Shinigami must find a way to stabilize the Soul Society while Ukitake remains as a temporary replacement for the Soul King. He then vows to create a gate for them to enter into the royal palace. Meanwhile, in Muken, Shunsui visits Aizen, revealing that the Central 46 had authorized him to use 3 keys to remove 3 seals from Aizen. Shunsui begins by unlocking the seal placed over Aizen's mouth, much to his surprise. Meanwhile, the gate that Urahara and the captains constructed begins to disappear due to a lack of Reiatsu, but then Mayuri arrives, criticizing Urahara for wasting time. He suggests using a Reiatsu amplifier to create a more stable gate. As the gateway reforms, Shunsui continues unlocking Aizen's seals, starting with his left eye and then ankles. Aizen, however, mocks Shunsui, suggesting that releasing his seals is unnecessary. Shunsui reassures Aizen as he offers him the chance to fight Yhwach for their shared interest, as it's evident that Aizen is reluctant to agree to him. We then cut back to the royal palace as Ichigo attacks Yhwach with a Getsuga Tensho, but Yhwach declares that all of Ichigo's battles have been for his benefit. He reveals that Ichigo's growth from defeating Aizen to regaining his powers had all served for the purpose of destroying the Soul King. He insists that their wills are intertwined and that Ichigo's destiny is to serve him. Uryu then arrives, firing an arrow at Ichigo in order to prevent him from interfering with Yhwach. Yoruichi, distracted, loses control of the barrier around the Soul King. As Yhwach approaches the Soul King, Yoruichi tries to attack him, but her arm is twisted into a pulp by Pernaida's ability, the Compulsory. Yhwach seizes the moment, placing his hand on Mimihagi and ripping it away from the Soul King. This then plunges the realms back into chaos. With Mimihagi forcibly removed, Ukitake's life is endangered. Urahara notes that Mimihagi is being absorbed into Yhwach, and soon a torrent of dark Reiatsu falls from the royal palace as it hits the protective membrane above the Serete. This barrier begins to deteriorate under Yhwach's overwhelming power. If it fails, then it actually threatens the entirety of the Soul Society, as the torrent of dark Reiatsu will consume all of it. In chapter 620, Yhwach's transformation frightens even his elite Schutzstaffel, though Hashward reassures them that the flood of the Soul King's power will only harm their enemies, the Shinigami. By chapter 626, Yhwach's absorption of the Soul King and Mimihagi is complete, as it transforms him into a being draped in overwhelming dark energy. Creatures then are born from the Soul King's power and they pour into the Serete, as the Shinigami quickly become overwhelmed. As Soifon prepares to destroy the weakened protective barrier above the Serete, she is attacked by these creatures. Amid the chaos, Aizen then suddenly appears and he suppresses the creatures with his immense Reiatsu. In chapter 622, the Shinigami react to seeing Aizen, who casually appears on the battlefield after freshly being released from Muken. Aizen, in his usual composed manner, congratulates Rukia on her recent promotion to being a vice captain. Rukia understandably is shocked as she demands to know why Aizen is free. Shunsui then steps forward from the shadows, revealing that he is the one responsible for Aizen's release. This revelation causes an uproar amongst the captains and lieutenants who protest Shunsui's decision. Despite all of the outcry, Shunsui stands firm, explaining that pride alone will not save the world. He adds that it is not a bad thing to use one evil to defeat another greater evil. After this brief confrontation, Aizen turns to Shunsui and asks if he intends to release the seals on his arms, thus allowing him to fully participate in the battle. Shunsui, however, clarifies that he has only been authorized to use 3 keys, ones that have unlocked Aizen's mouth, his left eye, and his ankles. The remaining bindings, including those keeping Aizen tied to the chair, are still in place. Aizen scoffs as he questions how Shunsui expects him to deal with Yhwach's spiritual monsters while being bound to the chair. Shunsui coolly responds by suggesting that Aizen isn't going to be sitting idly by while the creatures devour him. With that, the conversation ends as a new swarm of creatures begins to descend from the sky. To the shock of all of the assembled Shinigami, Aizen effortlessly destroys them with Hado number 90 Kurohitsugi, and notably he does this without reciting the incantation, an impressive feat that leaves everyone in awe. And even Shunsui is impressed by this, as he acknowledges that Aizen must have grown even stronger during his time in Muken if he is able to cast a chantless Kurohitsugi, which is powerful enough to clear rubble and spirit monsters. Aizen, however, admits that his real intention wasn't to deal with the creatures, but it was to test whether if his attack could destroy the restraints of his chair. With his power surging, Aizen begins to harness his immense spiritual pressure as it becomes clear that he is preparing to bring down the royal palace itself. The Shinigami are just left stunned as they witness Aizen effortlessly destroy the dark veil surrounding the Serete. However, their shock deepens when they sense Aizen's spiritual pressure beginning to vanish. Shunsui calmly explains that the restraints Aizen wears don't suppress his Reiatsu, they merely confine it to his immediate vicinity. Yet even this confining force is extraordinarily strong, thus representing the pinnacle of the Soul Society's technological advances. No matter what happens, they cannot allow Aizen to make a mockery of their efforts by being free. Captain Mayuri elaborates, explaining that as long as a Shinigami's heart is beating, their Reiatsu will continue to pour out. Stopping this flow would require stopping the heart itself. Mayuri goes on to reveal that the criminals in Muken who exist within the deepest prison of the Soul Society are too powerful to be executed because no one in the Soul Society is capable of killing them. Instead, all of their technological expertise has been focused on restraining restraining both Aizen's body and his Reiatsu, Mayuri cheekily comments that the extent of the restraint that is placed upon Aizen is entirely up to him, as he challenges Aizen if he had really thought that his power was beyond his technological expertise. Aizen, never one to back down from a challenge, taunts Mayuri in return, suggesting that he crank the restraint to its maximum to see which will win, Aizen's abilities or Mayuri's technology. Before their verbal duel escalates further, Sternritter Yu Nanana appears and interrupts by using his shrift the Underbelly as he analyzes and attacks Aizen's Reiatsu. Nanana explains that he has spent time mapping out Aizen's Reiatsu, discovering its weaknesses and holes. His attack works to exploit those holes, thus rendering Aizen vulnerable by paralyzing his spiritual pressure. But before the Sternritter can finish the job, Baz B, Lil Toto and Giselle arrive. Without hesitation, Baz B fires his Burner Finger 1 and takes out Nanana. Shunsui, sensing the situation is becoming more chaotic as he worries about the Shinigami's progress on rebuilding the gate to the royal palace. Bazbi, however, declares that the Quincy will assist the Shinigami in creating a gate to the royal palace, but under one condition: the Shinigami must allow the remaining Quincy to accompany them. And their reason for turning against Yhwach is that he had cast aside the remaining Sternritter, and now they seek revenge on their former leader. Aizen, regaining consciousness, casually tells Shunsui that this would be the ideal time to kill him, given his suppressed state. Shunsui, however, declines, stating that if something as trivial as the Underbelly could kill Aizen, the Soul Society would have done it long ago. Shunsui is impressed by the strength of Aizen, as he was able to move within 5 minutes of being attacked, despite his Reiatsu being suppressed. As Aizen processes the fact that the Quincy and Shinigami are now collaborating to storm the royal palace and defeat Yuha, he reflects on how he is annoyed that Ichigo is managing to set foot in the royal palace before him. Here we see Aizen's character subtly shift as he begins to acknowledge the growth of those around him, and he realizes that he is no longer the unrivaled being that he once believed himself to be, as there are a lot of powerful adversaries all around him. In chapter 624, Yoruichi rudely awakens Ichigo by kicking him in the back, as Ichigo, still groggy, recalls the recent events which had led to him falling from the royal palace. After realizing that Kon was responsible for rendering him unconscious, Ichigo playfully punishes him in a humorous moment, offering some comedic relief to ease all of the tension that is currently being going on within the narrative. Now healed by Orihime, Yoruichi devises a plan for a counterattack. When Ichigo wonders how they'll manage to return to the royal palace, a Garganta opens, revealing none other than Grimmjow. Grimmjow and Ichigo exchange their usual banter, but the surprise doesn't end there. Neliel also leaps out of the Garganta also. In an overjoyed state, she embraces Ichigo, informing him that Urahara crafted a device allowing her to switch between her adult and child forms. Grimmjow and Neliel bicker with each other, but they are interrupted by another voice that is coming from within the Garganta. We see Ichigo confused as he enters a box within the Garganta, only to be greeted by the Fallbringers Riruka and Yukio. Yoruichi explains the situation, that the two of them have been instrumental in creating the space that they are in. She explains the nature of the Dangai and how they are using the Valley of Screams, which are scattered throughout the Garganta, in order to create pocket dimensions. By using Yukio's ability to create space at will and Riruka's power to insert and remove objects, Urahara had enlisted the help of the Fallbringers. Riruka inserted an entire small Valley of Screams into a box, and Yukio transformed it into a navigatable place. This effectively allows them to sneak into the royal palace without detection. In chapter 626, Yuha undergoes a complete transformation after having absorbed both the Soul King and Mimihagi. The Schutzstaffel are left in awe as Yuha's body is engulfed in a torrent of Reiatsu, and it's manifesting as dark matter surrounding him. What stands out to me the most about this entire sequence of the fall of the Soul King is, amongst all of the chaos that is ensuing with the collapse of reality, Kubo decided to reintroduce us to the powerful villain Sosuke Aizen. Many fans anticipated that Aizen may align himself with Yhwach, given his history of antagonism towards the Soul Society and the Gotei 13. However, his decision to help the Shinigami came as a surprising twist, especially considering the fact that he had wanted to overthrow the Soul King. It's important to remember that during the fake Karakura Town arc, Aizen's ultimate goal was to overthrow the Soul King and to sit on top of the heavens as the true ruler of reality. In contrast, Yuha wants to rid the concept of death from reality, and he wants to destroy the current structure of the world. If Aizen aligns himself with Yhwach, then it means that he will be subjugated by him, and this isn't something that he Mimihagi is cool with. Another fascinating point surrounding the fall of the Soul King is the role that Mimihagi plays. Mimihagi had sided against Yhwach, actively trying to prevent his plans. As a sentient being, Mimihagi likely viewed Yhwach as a threat because of his intention to end the Soul King's existence. Additionally, the growing tension between Ichigo and Uryu during this part of the story takes the center stage, and I do believe that it will be expanded upon during the anime adaptation of the 1000-Year Blood War arc. The death of the Soul King has devastating consequences for everyone across the three realms. Ukitake's sacrifice gives us an insight into Mimihagi, the Soul King's right arm, and it reveals the aftermath of Ukitake's Kamikake ritual. Personally, the return of Aizen's character is my favorite part of this story, and I'm super excited to see how the anime handles his return. Hopefully this video has helped you to better understand the destruction of the Soul King, along with the death of Ukitake, the role that Mimihagi plays in the story, and the return of Aizen. Now, I'd love to know all of your thoughts about the fall of the Soul King. What are your thoughts on Yhwach manipulating Ichigo to kill the Soul King? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention about this part of the story, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach Explained video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.